So I welcome Sumya Yasmin, Managing Editor of Education World, to take on the first panel of NEP 2020. This is our third panel discussion for the state webinar. Sumya, over to you.
Thank you, Sapna. It's my pleasure to
तो मेरी अभी मीटिंग है बट हाँ एक बीच में सेकंड we'll sit and explore.
Anisha ma'am, can you just mute your speaker, please?
Yourself, please.
You can continue, sir.
Thanks, Bhavan. Let me begin by introducing our distinguished panelists for our opening subject and panel discussion, Case for Reopening Schools. Rashid Sharfuddin. Rashid is headmaster of Salaki International School, Dehradun, an alumna of the University of Delhi and University of Bath. Rashid has formerly taught at highly reputed boarding schools, including the Lawrence School, Lovedale, Assam Valley School, Guwahati, and the Doon School, Dehradun. A sports enthusiast, avid biker, traveler, and reader, Rashid has been very keenly interested in the education of marginalized communities and has presented research papers on the subject at various national and international seminars. Rashid, warm welcome to you.
Thank you, Sumya. Pleasure to be here.
Our next panelist is Meeta Sharma. Meeta is principal of the Mussoorie International School, ranked among India's top 5 all-girls boarding schools in the Education World India School rankings, an alumna of Northeastern University, Shillong, and University College London. Meeta has teaching experience in the Doon School, Dehradun, and was hitherto principal of the highly ranked all-girls Modi School, Lakshmangarh. Ms. Sharma, a warm welcome to you.
Thank you, Soumya. Thank you.
Our next panelist is Mr. Arpit Panjwani. Arpit is the director of Ma Anandmayi Memorial School, a CIC-affiliated day-camp boarding school in Raiwala, Uttarakhand, an alumnus of Sri Ram College of Commerce and IE Business School, Madrid, and former chair of CIA Young Indians. Arpit is an edupreneur whose special expertise is in school management, business development, business strategy, leadership, and team management. Arpit, we extend a warm welcome to you.
Thank you very much, Sumya. Very kind introduction and really glad to be amongst my own educators today. Thank you very much.
Yes. You're in distinguished company. You have 2 of your former teachers as panelists.
Absolutely.
It's a pleasure to have you, Arpit.
Thank you very much, ma'am.
Our next panelist is Dilip George. Dilip is principal of the CBSE-affiliated Doon International School, Riverside Campus. Dilip has over 19 years of rich K-12 education experience, having taught in the country's top-ranked schools, including Vibgyor High, Vadodara, Presidency School, Bangalore, Singapore International School, Mumbai, Canadian International School, and Indus International School, Bangalore, and also Good Shepherd International School, Ooty. Dilip, a warm welcome to you too.
Thank you, Sumya, and good afternoon to all the panelists and all the participants.
Okay, great. So let's begin our discussion. After almost 7 months of closure of schools because of the unprecedented COVID-19 virus and pandemic, the Union government in its Unlock 5 guidelines has very cautiously given the go-ahead for reopening of schools in a graded manner, leaving the decision of reopening of schools and colleges to respective state and union territory governments. Punjab and Haryana among the first states to announce that they're going to reopen schools from October 15. In a staggered manner, Uttar Pradesh too has agreed to reopen schools for students of class 9 and 12 from October 19, but other states are yet to decide. With the COVID-19 infections continuously rising and no sign of the country flattening the infection curve, the debate is raging among parents and educators, communities about the pros and cons of reopening schools. In the US, UK, France, and Germany, schools have reopened. And the expert opinion is veering to the point of view that the loss of learning and future incomes to children is too huge to be ignored. According to the World Bank, school closures may cost India almost $400 billion in terms of future earnings and the huge learning loss to children. Rashid, let me draw you in first. You said that earlier when we spoke that you're all set to reopen your school on November 1st. You've been a very strong advocate even before reopening schools, especially boarding schools, as you believe they are safer than day schools. What are your reasons?
Sumya, there are many factors, and the reopening of school is not just a moral responsibility and obligation, but it's also a practical one. Uh, while schools have to reopen for various reasons, largely because we are in the business of teaching, and I think priority comes first for all schools. Teaching is the priority, and when every other sector has opened up, I think it's but natural that education should also open up. One of the really amusing theory that I hear about reopening of the school is that it will lead to more cases. But the truth is for every other sectors. I mean, if you look at it, you look at business, you look at offices, you look at homes, you have parents, you have students who are down with COVID, and they all are recovering quite well. So I do understand the risk of opening schools, but I always thought, and I have written in Times of India as well as in Education World and also on few channels, that boarding schools are in a better position, largely because one could provide the kind of sanitized campus that probably is not possible in a day school or a day boarding. In boarding school, you have the issues are two. One is about traveling back to school. So I'm glad that Uttarakhand cabinet has decided to allow reopening of schools from first. We have already advertised. We have informed the parents. We have sent the SOPs and the guidelines and the consent form. So, personally, I'm a big champion of reopening of school because I do feel that students have been missing on lots, especially when you are in a boarding school. So once the students come in, then your only challenge would remain that you have to create some kind of a social bubble where they don't interact with someone outside that social bubble, and that would be your mess staff and some of the support staff that will come to support boarding infrastructure. But we have thought about it, and I think it's a much more easier. I'm not saying that it's without its flaws. I'm sure that there can be issues. I'm sure there could be cases, and there will be cases. And I've mentioned it to my parents that you all have cases at home, within your family, everywhere else. So we don't need to live with the fear factor. And the primary objective is about education, and it's not about of course, I'm not talking about that. It's not about safety and physical well-being. That is a paramount. I mean, beyond anything. But it's really sad that you have almost I think all more than is it 30 crores children out of school right now. And I did also mention that there have been issues of infrastructure. There have been issues about bandwidth. There have been issues about mental well-being of students. There have been issues about parents, working and then trying to support learning from home. And when we talk about all this, we very conveniently we forget that large part of students, they come from day school as well as from schools that do not have that kind of facility, both in terms of teacher support and technology. So putting all this together, I think that it's a good decision and something that will benefit the entire community.
Okay, thanks, Rashid, for that very balanced perspective. Mita, if I could move on to you. Most parents are not comfortable with sending children to school until a vaccine is available. In fact, in a lot of surveys, including those conducted by Education World, almost 70% of parents don't want to send children to school. How can schools allay parents' fears?
Sumaya, it's a good question. Thank you for asking it. But we have to begin somewhere. They say that fear begets fear. So if we continue on this fear line of our thought, it's not going to decrease. Some of them will have to be brave enough to send their kids. Others will follow suit once they see that the students who have been sent to school are actually safe. Now, to actually further Rashid's statement that boarding schools are safe, I would categorize boarding schools also to be of two categories. There are boarding schools which are in the plains, and there are boarding schools which are in the hills. Now, my school happens to be a hill boarding school. So it is a totally different perspective. The vacations are totally different for us. We are a January to December kind of a school. We are totally self-quarantined among these pristine hills of Himalayas. We've hardly had, with COVID cases which are countable on fingers. So we don't really know what exactly COVID is. But because of various reasons, the entire country shut down. We also had to shut down. There was no reason for us to shut down. We were totally self-reliant, self-sustained within our own cells. The entire staff stays within campus. Like Rashid says that, the traveling back to school is not an issue with us. In fact, traveling back home during the vacations could have been an issue, or sending back kids when the schools closed down could have been an issue at that time. Yes, we have to bring in the sense, kind of overcoming the fear factor, and which is only possible by following all the norms which the state government and the central government have laid down. I'm sure all schools are going to do that. But having said all of that, I personally feel is that someone has to make a beginning. Some parents who are brave enough have to make a beginning. They have to send the children to school. Others will follow suit. And, in the good wisdom and understanding of people, staggering on opening of schools is a great idea, because that will give majority of the parents who would be sending the kids to school in the second rung or the third rung, as in the staggered way, they will be more comfortable sending them. The first lot may be a little brave, or may have to be a little brave, but it'll be very easy for the second lots and the third lots of kids to come in when they see that things are in place in school. So we will have to kind of create that belief within parents by keeping the first lot safe. Now, as even Rashid said, we may have problems, and problems, we've got to fight them. But how long can we stay closed? We also support a vulnerable section of the society, which, earns its livelihood from schools. If the schools stay closed, if the fee-struck fee does not come in, it's not just the mental well-being of just the students, but also the people who are actually they're getting their bread and butter from schools. So we got to fight it out. We all have to be in it together and fight it out and ensure that we override this fear factor. We cannot stay closed. The learning gaps are widening day by day. It's going to be a huge task when the girls come back to school. I mean, I talk about the girls because my school's an all-girls school. But when they come back to school, we may have girls in the same class with wide learning gaps. It'll take us a while to bridge those gaps. Despite the fact that the content has been reduced by various boards, it is not going to be easy, but we have to make a beginning somewhere.
Yeah, thanks, Meeta. It's I think rightly said that the first step has to be taken by a few parents and a few brave parents. Arpit, if I could come to you now and get your opinion on there are safety guidelines. Of course, the state and the central governments have all given their safety guidelines and health SOPs. Now, with schools reopening, SOPs and safety guidelines will assume the greatest importance, perhaps even more than curriculum and pedagogy. How equipped are schools to implement them in terms of additional investment in infrastructure, health staff, doctors, nurses, perhaps even testing facilities?
Well, thank you very much for your question. And firstly, let me comment on the speakers before me who presented very, very valid arguments. Just coming to your question in terms of being equipped, I think all of us are taking it by the day, and there are tons of resources available online which we could deal with. But I'd like to take you to certain data points that I've been running over in terms of the kids. So a lot of studies show of about 50,000 sample cases in terms of the COVID load that has been analyzed. Only 1 to 2% of those have been kids below the age group of 10 years. And if I take it to between 10 to 19, that's only 1%. So we're dealing with a fairly small number, and the incidence of COVID in terms of the age group of kids we deal with is fairly low in comparison. So we don't inherently need to cope with as much as we're really probably assuming or estimating at this point of time. But I'd like to bring you to my personal, context herein. My school's based in a rural area in the interiors of Rajaji Tiger Reserve, and I've been living here myself for quite some time. I've seen that kids have been walking around, going for their tuitions, coaching classes, games, sports, social interactions, cultural interactions, and the works. So over time, it's only led me to believe that, the kids are going to go where they want to go and the parents are going to send them irrespective. Now, what remains in terms of the SOPs is for schools to prepare well and to cope with all of that in terms of the medical equipment. So I've been fortunate, and I guess all the boarding schools have also been fortunate to have an infirmary on campus. So I already had one, a fully functional one, in collaboration with a hospital in Uttarakhand. And then beyond that, I feel we need to put up sanitization places. We've already put up all the equipment. In fact, I was doing a dry run today. So all the kids turned up, all the ones who are in the rural vicinity, they turned up for the dry run. We did the mock run with the buses. We did the mock run of how the kids are going to walk in. We did the mock run of how they're going to go out, consume their tiffins. I'm predominantly a day school, by the way. So most of my students walk it down from the villages, and we actually did the walk down from their house here from the moment they walk in, like a whole customer experience, to the moment how the teachers are going to escort them to classrooms, how the social distancing there is going to be maintained. If they don't come with masks, we have to be able to provide them masks at the gate itself. We're going to be using all the different gates available at school. The sanitizers have to be kept all over. In classrooms, at least a 6 feet distance. And when I actually did the numbers on my campus, I'm looking at about 100 meters square area, given the fact that I'm a 12-acre campus with about 500 odd kids. I'm looking at over 100 meters square per child. So, and we're doing classes all over, whether it's on my sports ground, the pavilion, whether it's in the multi-purpose hall. So the incidence as well as the risk factor is much lower being on campus when I really compare it to them going for tuitions and being clogged into groups of 5, 7 or 10, 15, which they actually are already doing. So that's my argument in favor of schools reopening, and we're really preparing and bracing up for it come November too.
Okay, great, Arpit. Thanks. Dilip, if I could come to you now. When schools reopen, of course, there'll be staggered timings, and perhaps initially only secondary school students will be allowed to come in, or schools will ask only secondary school students to come in. So schools may need to evolve a blended learning model, you think, continue online classes plus have physical classes. Are schools and especially teachers ready to take this additional load on of running physical as well as online learning classes?
Thank you, Sumya, for the question. And, I think I've been hearing all the panelists and very valid points which have been coming out. It has been a difficult time, especially for the teachers as well, because as compared to students, I think it's more time that the teachers are spending on these devices or the gadgets in front of the screen to prepare for these lessons, to equip themselves, to train themselves. So initial days have been really challenging for the teachers. With school reopening and the guidelines, where the government says that you have to give the option of online schooling as well, is going to be challenging for the teachers, and it's like, double the effort to be taken. But I think the feasible solution that we are looking at is to live stream the classes when we reopen, where the students are in the class and the teacher is using the same device while they are teaching. It is live streamed for the students as well, because that's the only way that we can balance out the load for the teacher. And like what Ms. Meeta had already mentioned, I think, it's going to be a big or huge gap that needs to be covered now. It's not just in terms of the curriculum for the senior classes, but I think the physical and the mental health of the children is something that will take time to get back to the normal. I'm sure most schools have been running the online classes effectively, but there are schools, where they don't have these technologies available. There are children who are missing out on the complete learning itself. So for them, there's no other alternative but to, where the school reopens and they start attending classes at least for a couple of months. And, it's definitely, it's a requirement that somewhere the beginning has to happen. If you're just waiting for it, I think probably it's become a tug of war between the parents, the schools, or the government, that who's going to take the responsibility if a child is infected. I'm sure no parent is also going to take a responsibility if a child gets infected from somewhere outside and then comes to the school. So it's something that we all have to do it collectively together, have a trust factor. I think the school and the parent body have to come together, have that trust on one another, not trying to find faults or get into a blame game. And I'm sure we'll be able to overcome the situation.
Thanks, Dilip. Rightly said that it has to be a collaborative and joint effort. Rashid, if I could come back to you and put this question to you. A lot of schools associations across the country are demanding that when schools reopen, and if there is an outbreak, and if there are, either teacher or student infections on campus, that schools should be legally indemnified against any kind of lawsuits and legal battles. What is your take on this, and how do you think so schools are equipped to handle if there is an outbreak?
So, I just have I'm going to pose a situation. When we go to hospital for, let's say, any operation, right? We do sign the entire huge document saying that, the doctor and the hospital, they're not responsible. But we do have the faith in the system that the doctor and hospital are going to do their best to save our lives and do what they have to do. And I'm a bit concerned that kind of faith is probably not coming right now. For instance, as I think Dilip was saying, that at home also they can get infected. Does that mean that, we get into legal tangle at home or outside where they're going to a shopping mall? Now everything is open, isn't it? In Uttarakhand, swimming pools are open now. The cinema halls are open. Everything is open. The market, if you go out in Dehradun, you wouldn't be able to make out that if COVID ever existed in Dehradun, I can assure you. It's like crowded and traffic is everywhere. So, and those people who are on the street are parents. I don't see them with masks, right? Large number of them, about 80% of them without mask or wearing masks in not a proper manner. So if parents themselves are not following the rules and protocols, but they don't want to hold school responsible if anything goes wrong. So I think that's where we need to draw the line. As I said, things will go wrong. The government should then make sure that the schools, that you don't hang principals and directors for a COVID case. It will happen. I mean, it happens in all the factories. It's happening in all shops. It's happening everywhere. So I think that's one thing that we have been fighting for. And the second thing is about providing the kind of support. In case there's an outbreak, then there should be medical support to all schools. Whether it comes from hospital, it comes from government organization, wherever it is. In most of the cases, Arpit was saying, I think there's a WHO report on this about outbreak, that while there are about almost about 30% of the world population who are above the age of between 2 to 18, but the infection among them have only been about 1.5% and fatality negligible. I'm not sure, maybe. And if that has happened in India, it has happened in the cases where we have, some children who we have poverty and other issues, and also below the age of 5 and 6. So largely students will, everyone knows it, but of course, if, parent or I'm a parent, so I'll be worried if my child falls sick, even regular fever, forget about COVID or anything else. So I think it's but natural that every parent should be worried. They'd want school to take every possible precautions, which we will. I mean, in a sense that, there are, you have training of the staff members, you have the entire SOPs running into 30, 40 pages, which has been shared with parents. I've sent it to them. They're all in empty bond that has to be signed. Consent letter has to be produced. So it's not about that we don't take responsibility. It's about the fact that things they just like in regular boarding school, we do take an indemnity bond. We say that he might be playing sports, or he may be going for mountaineering, or something may happen to him or her. And in that case, all parents very happily waive it off. So I don't see any reason why they didn't do it now, because they will understand, and I'm sure they do, that we are doing our best to make sure that things remain under control and we follow all the protocols, which we should.
Okay, thanks. Meeta, over to you now. The question I want to put to you is, after 7 months, schools will be reopening. What do you see the impact on learning and assessment? And particularly, how are schools going to now address the huge issue of loss of learning? Yes, online learning has been happening, but online learning doesn't have the same effectiveness for all children. And particularly for secondary school students, now there's board exams, which there is talk of being postponed, but even if they're postponed, they'll be less than about 4 or 5 months away. So how is all this going to fit in the school reopening calendar? You have to unmute yourself, please, Meeta. Unmute yourself.
Yeah, thank you. Muted. Yeah. So each school actually has to chalk out a strategy which suits them. We are in as I said, we are a January to December school. For us, reopening and, kind of bridging the gaps and helping out the board students is going to be a very, very tough task, because the terrain and the weather conditions here are not conducive for students to live in the month of December and January. So we are in a very, very different bubble of our own self. And our situation is even more complex, because other schools, as I said, the boarding schools in the plains will have time till March to at least bridge them. But for us, it's going to be a very, very difficult task. Now, to basically answer your question, it's going to be tough. But however said that, we will have to figure out some methodology, whether it is online, through various pedagogies of teaching, to bridge these gaps. Now, the gaps, learning gaps, and the assessment that has taken place in school, and the learning gaps which have developed because of the online mode, actually, they can also be categorized, because the impact is going to be different in different age groups. For instance, if I talk about the primary school, we still have a long way ahead, and till they come till their board classes, and till the learning within school, learning never stops, but within school timing culminates, we still have a long time to bridge it. Their learning gaps are going to be even more severe, because their concentration span is much, much less, and they are attention deficient. They need that individualized kind of look. They need to have individualized lesson plans and individual attention, for that matter. But however, we still have time with them, so I'm not worried. The situation now, whether it's for them or for the senior people, it is for everyone in the country as well as abroad. So with the hope that no girl is left behind, no girl is ahead, they are where they are, and from wherever they are, we take them ahead. We develop strategies and pedagogies to test the basic concepts, right? Through proctored assessment. For that matter, if I talk about assessment, we're not even very sure of how much of integrity, academic integrity, there has been while even giving those examinations that we have conducted. They have done them within their own spheres, in their own, homes, and without any kind of supervision, maybe supervision from the parents, but we really don't know. The kids can play up. So how much of it is actual true learning, and how much of it was copied, pasted from elsewhere? And these are very, very serious issues that I'm talking about. I would like to believe that every girl has been 100% honest, and every girl has accountability of learning, and she has done the best despite whatever gaps there are. I would like to believe that, but I would probably be living in a fool's paradise if I believe that. And so, it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough, in strategies, especially for schools like us, are going to be very, very severe strategies. We are thinking of opening up the school school and staying open even during the winter vacation. So we don't just have to fight COVID and get the SOPs into place, but we also have to keep them warm so they stay alive through those winter months when we have those 2 feet and 3 feet snowfall where they can't even walk and reach the academic block.
You're right. It's indeed it's actually a very, very challenging scenario for especially school managers, especially schools like yourself, which are actually in a social bubble and follow a Jan to December calendar. Arpit, if I could come to you now, Arpit, there's a lot of argument that social distancing and sanitization rules are going to be very, very difficult to be followed and implemented in schools, even for lower grade children. It's most opinion is that it's going to be impossible, and even for secondary school.
So then she's very slow.
Dr. Kashyap, can you mute
yourself, please, sir? Yeah, thank you. So the opinion is that it's almost impossible for lower grades and even secondary students in terms of sports, extracurricular activities. Are they going to happen after school reopens? And will social distancing and disciplining and implementing is going to become a big challenge? And that may put a lot of stress on the existing people resources in schools. Arpit, how do you look at that?
Certainly, ma'am, without a doubt, it's going to be a challenge. And of course, as educators, I think we braced up to be taking all these changes. In case we would not be reopening schools altogether. And I believe students act as agents of change to make them understand the importance of whether it's social distancing, wearing a mask properly, or using the sanitizer. I think they go back home and convey the same message properly in the right spirit and perspective to their parents back home. And how it's going to be done, the way, I envision it, is to continue re-emphasizing it timely, periodically, day after day, and using the school campus in a sense that, students continue to reiteratively get that message time and again, whether when they're going to the washrooms, whether drinking water, walking in at the gate, in the buses, in the classrooms, and each member of a school fraternity, be it the teaching staff or the support staff, everybody has to follow it and walk the talk. I think it's important that, now is the time as educators, we show that inspiration from our own selves by following all these rules entirely, so that students can really get inspired by looking at us. And the important factor over here is going to be that we have to make things available ourselves as well. So in a sense, we will sort of make carrying sanitizers compulsory for students or carrying masks as well. But the fact is, they're all children, and in case they forget to carry them, we have to make them available somehow. And which is what we're working towards, making provisions for all these facilities on campus. Also, day school for us, I think the challenge is going to be a little more than boarding school, because kids are going to walk down from home itself. So of course, we have to be prepared to screen them repeatedly. We have to be prepared for emergency isolation rooms, which we are making provisions for. So I think the challenges are immense, but if you plan out strategically and properly, as schools have done abroad, I think a lot of us have been in touch with a lot of school leaders abroad, and they've orchestrated it very well. And we just need to take a leaf out of their book and follow the same procedure.
Okay. Dilip, if I could come to you now and put this question to you about, there's a lot of concern about teacher safety. For example, in Karnataka, teachers have given a memorandum to the government that schools should not be reopened until a vaccine comes and is safe, saying that more than that, governments and school managements are being very lax about teacher safety, and that the possibility that teachers may get infected. So do you have any such opposition happening in your state, and what's your take on this, about the whole idea of keeping teachers safe?
Yeah, see, Sumya, I don't think, especially if I talk about my teachers, I have never had any such concerns. I think many of them are also looking forward to the school reopening, because I think that social interaction is something that they are also missing. And as I said, the time that they are spending in front of the screen is also affecting their mental and physical health. With regard to the infection, see, it's all of us, who could be, who could get infected when the school reopen. It could be the teacher, it could be the student, support staff. Even I can be part of this as long as I have interaction with the children or with anyone. So it's not just one particular stakeholder that should be worried about. And if we are looking at, the SOPs to be followed, and if we are looking at, the entire sanitization, social distancing to be followed, it has to happen wholeheartedly. Till the time the vaccine is out, which we never know, whether it is early 2021 or whether it will get delayed. See, the only solution to this is to take care of ourselves. Like how Rashid sir just said that, you go out to the market, you'll see people all, moving around freely and, maybe without mask, without the social distancing. So unless each one takes, care of themselves, we are not going to have any control over this particular situation. So it's not just the teachers. I think all of us can get infected, but the only solution is to take care of ourselves.
Okay, thanks, Dilip. I have another broader question, which any one of you all can take it, which is about when school reopens. A lot of school managements I've spoken to are talking about, extra expenditure in terms of sanitization and setting up SOP protocols, greater investment in staff, health SOPs, implementation. So this would involve some amount of increase in fees. And the last 6 months has literally been a battleground for schools associations around the country, with state government circulars asking parents not to pay, defer fees, etc. So how do you think this is going to be become an additional problem? Anyone, Rashid, would you want to comment?
So some, majority of schools will have that issue. If you look around the country, you'll find so many schools that barely survives with the kind of fee they charge. The school that probably is surviving right now and continue to survive would be the school that has a corpus, that has a larger base, that has a recognition, that has a name, and they have numbers. So I think schools already are falling in bad. Lots of them are falling out of the. Lots of them have shut down. So that has.
So Dilip, you need to mute.
Yeah, Mr. Dilip, please mute yourself.
Sorry, I think so.
So I do understand parents' perspective about hard time, and it is true. It is for a large number of parents. Not just during COVID time, but business has been bad for last few years anyhow. So I do understand that point very, very well. But what I don't understand is that an institution also has to make investment, especially in these times. All schools, I'm sure, they have rolled back the fee to support the parents. I'm very glad that for the first time in Uttarakhand history and probably the country history, that a court, that is the Nainital High Court, has taken a view about boarding schools and have come out and agreeing that boarding school have their own expenses, and just the fact that the tuition fee is not just applicable to them. So this is the first time it has happened in a country's history. First time it also has happened in Uttarakhand history, which at least I've been here for 20 years, is that the education secretary has invited a boarding school representative to talk about how things would be there. There's another matter that we don't have any boarding school, specifically boarding school association in the country, which is, there's no voice of that, and we need to bridge that. Some of us are working on it now. But the fact is that there will be expenses. Of course, schools would, take a view about supporting parents depending upon case to case, and also the fact that revenue is low, and we all should be ready for next 2 years of bit of hard times.
I think Dr. Kashyap raised his hand. I think he'd like to make a comment. Dr. Kashyap? You can unmute yourself, sir.
Dr. Kashyap, you need to
Okay,
unmute.
he's not.
Yeah.
Unmute yourself, sir.
Good
Yes.
afternoon to one. Good afternoon to all of you once again. It's a very good question. The schools are already hard pressed for money. As you know, in day schools, hardly 20% to 30% fees have been received. And in some cases in boarding house also, it has been hardly 20 to 30%. But some schools have been able to manage 50% fees. That too also after reducing the fees. Whether somebody has reduced 40%, someone has reduced 30%, or somebody has reduced like 50,000 or 1 lakh rupees. To have additional expenditure on that part is a question that the school have to manage. Because whatever are the SOPs of the government, we have to strictly follow them. And because ultimately it will be the principal or the head of the institution or the management will be responsible in case anything happening and if there is a lack. Mr. Rashid just said that there was a webinar of the head of the institution for residential schools. It was made very clear that all SOPs of the given by the government will be strictly followed by the schools. So keeping in mind the SOPs we have to follow and we have to spend a lot of money. Only depend after the school reopens. We talk to the parents and tell them or what have been our sources of income and the losses which the school have occurred due to this COVID-19. And mutually, if the parents agree, some other portion can be made. The total expenditure can be seen and can be shared between the parents and the school authorities. I think that it all depends on the head of the institution, how he or she manages her parents in that part. Because for the management also, it has been a very big blow for last 7 months in that part, because in boarding house, all the expenditures are as it is. In my school, 60 families are staying in the campus. So they are getting all salaries, whether staff, teaching staff, whether the dining staff, the safai wala, the PNs, the ayas, the chowkidar, electrician, all you see these people in the residential school have to be a part there, because we cannot borrow people. If we need a carpenter, we say, oh, we need a carpenter for one day. It is not possible. So we all boarding schools have to keep these people, and it is a big expenditure in that part. So similarly in day schools also, day schools in Dehradun, in whole of Uttarakhand, the fees is being charged from 500 to 5,000 rupees. Those small schools which are just charging fees like 500 or up to 1,000 or 2,000, and those schools who are charging fees up to 5,000, under right to education, only 25% now students are being admitted from last 10 years. There are certain schools, there 30% children are there, and the fees which you receive from the government is only 1,285 rupees. So that is also a big loss. On the other hand, as I just told you, only 20% fees have been received. So, and that also tuition fees, not other charges. Once the school reopens, we will have to talk to the parents, and it all depends on the head of the institutions and the management. How do they tackle with their parents and tell them because in every school there is a PTA, Parents Teacher Association is there, and we have a meeting also. We call the parents, we talk to them very clearly and tell them this has been an extra burden on the schools. I'm sure many wise parents will agree that yes, it can be shared in that part.
Yes.
I
Thanks, Dr. Kashyap. Thank you, Arpit. I think you wanted to just make a comment. After that, we'll take up Q&A. Arpit, quickly, please.
Quickly, yes.
That's right.
So, ma'am, इसमें schools को थोड़ा सा resourceful, creative और innovative होना पड़ेगा. I mean, I can just share about what we are doing. Whatever scrap we had, जितना भी कूड़ा कबाड़ था, उससे हमने sanitizer stand बना लिए स्कूल में. I also have something called an Atal Tinkering Lab. उसमें हमने एक 1000 mask project किया, जिसमें बच्चों ने और उनके parents ने सारों ने अपने आप mask बनाए. So we already have those masks available with us. The fogging machine is also being made in the Atal Tinkering Lab. उसके अलावा अगर जैसे आपके स्कूल में कोई alumnus या board members, anybody is making sanitizer, तो आप उनसे अपना उपलब्ध कर लीजिए. मतलब we will all have some contacts. Schools can buy cheap, they can procure from people they know, and that is how it's going to work out for all COVID related material.
Okay, thanks, Arpit. I'd like to now invite Bhavin Shah, CEO of Education World, to take up and moderate the question and answer session. Bhavin, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Sumya. And good evening to all the panelists. Before I come to the very interactive panel, which is here and it's very engaging, there is an important perspective which I want to share because I've heard all of you. And what I understand is people are looking at solutions saying, there are a lot of going to be collaborative efforts. There are going to be concerns which are going to be raised about safety and security. As a territory, Uttarakhand and particularly Dehradun, Mussoorie, I think so if you guys come up with some kind of an innovative solution, you are a densely populated boarding and education hub. Unlike we have known, there are quality standards which are been kept in various other industries like ISO or ISI by government and so on and so forth. If cumulatively your schools can come up with a standard which is followed by all, and which is signed by parent body, by which they come to know that, yes, this is an association which has come and look, because I think so every one of you is investing separately into reopening the school. But if suppose there is a tag that, yes, this is stamped by, or this is marked by a group of very progressive school, and that would ensure a parent, because as Rashesh mentioned, parents are out on streets, they are not wearing masks, and there would be definitely blame game, saying school didn't do the role properly. There would be some questions on teachers. There will be a lot of questions on the behavioral aspect. But according to me, I think so whatever we can think, we only have to act. No government, no Einstein is going to come back and going to tell us saying, hey, look, this is the way that you need to go forward. So if you want to do a collaborative effort, I think so Dehradun can lead in the nation, because the densely population that you have of all education institute and a classic mix of residential, international, all kind of curriculum which are available. Cumulatively, if you guys can have a standard, which is like say Dehradun standard or a boarding standard, Uttarakhand standard, I think so you can really do well for parents to buy in. Anyway, we can get on to questions which are related to this, and probably I would like to take the very important question, and I could address this to Mr. Rashid. This is from Robert Thorne. Does any of your experiences so far inspire you to change your approach to education so that the future lockdowns and hybrid situation, that is operation with kids at school and at home, can be better coped with? I think some of the issues could be avoided if we took a different approach to bringing up our young people.
So interesting question, and nothing to do with this, but I'll try to answer this. I think it's important that education should address competencies and skills, and not just the knowledge part. And the world and education for tomorrow and today is about skills and competencies, and not necessarily the knowledge part, which lots of school believe in. So my college and school background, my professional background being in a couple of good schools has kind of prepared me to look at a process of inquiry-based learning, process where you make students master of their own learning and not use the traditional mode of teaching. So we try to cultivate values, we try to cultivate skills like resilience, like teamwork, like empathy, of course, about bouncing back from any kind of setbacks. I think these are important part of growing up in any school education. And that's where we need to now look at. And if you look at NEP and other things that is coming up now, you will see that lots of those things are now beginning to develop in that, even CBSE.
But sir, I think so the question is pertaining to in case during this lockdown, if you have experienced something which can change the course of education in the future, so that in case there are further lockdowns which are coming in, your continuity remains. So is there something that you have experienced?
Some of the things that I'm sure all heads and all colleagues would have experienced is about how well teachers have taken upon the role of moving into technology and so technology is going to definitely play a longer part, there won't be a school or a classroom without technology now. That we all know, right, from government schools to big private schools. So I think that is one good addition to resource, that colleagues and teachers have become technology savvy. They have taken some of those courses and they have delivered that. So I think that's one important part will stay with all of us, despite either with you have COVID or you don't have COVID.
Can I add on to this, please?
Let Rashid, sir, if you have completed, then we can go on to Meeta, ma'am.
And the second part is about the entire blended learning and how we have approached that. I think that should lots of parents and colleagues should take heart in that, and also the fact that teaching can happen at home, some part of it, not all the part of it, especially not in boarding school context. But I think that's another learning that one can take, and the fact that a lot of resources and innovation has happened around a lockdown, and very specific to kind of situation we are in. So that all will help in education, and also the way education is transacted in COVID era or post-COVID era.
Yeah, so technology and blended learning is the way forward, and that's going to continue. Yes, Meeta, ma'am.
So basically, to add on to what Rashid said, his second point, to prepare us for any further, God forbid, any further pandemic or any kind of lockdown, blended learning has to be the way. So as and when the schools reopen, we have to ensure that they continue with this kind of blended learning, maybe flipped classrooms, or maybe, they learn to learn on their own also. And they should not be just dependent upon face-to-face learning or a teacher within their own classrooms or their own setting. So maybe twice a week, or if not twice, depending upon the age group that we are talking about, it has to become a feature within schools to ensure that they work on their own, they learn on their own, they are, they are able to submit assignments on their own. And it's not just handwritten ones, whether they use their devices, and blended learning continues. So they should be given freedom to sit at any part, any sacred learning space within the school premises and just attend the class. So this should become a norm now, in the time to come, in the years to come, to ensure that if suddenly something happens and we get into another lockdown, at least the transition is much easier. This time, the transition happened in a jerk. We were forced into the transition, wasn't easy. There were a lot of intimidations. There were a lot of, inhibitions. People did go on because they did not have an option. So they learned the hard way. This transition in the next lockdown, as I said, God forbid, shouldn't happen, should be an easy one. And it should be something which,
everyone is prepared.
Not just for the students, but for the teachers as well. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Arpit, the following two questions are from Shivani Gupta. For class 12, even though the theory syllabus has been reduced, the practicals are going to be an issue of our concern. So what would be the solution? And following it up with them, and I think so I will add on, because you run a day school, what are some suggestions to make school transport viable, considering the buses would be running under the less optimum capacity? So two questions to you, Arpit.
Great. So this is something I was working on today itself. Like, students have missed out on a lot of practicals, be it physics, chemistry, biology, in certain other subjects as well, where they were used to experiential learning too. So we've got to get them to do it hands-on. Like, as soon as kids are back at school, really go to the labs. We've done tons of theory during this lockdown, implemented that as far as possible. But now is the time to really get going with the practical aspect of it. All of those are remaining, and which is what we're working towards today, as I said. Give kids time to really go and do their experiments, work on their projects, the project-based learning, submit their assignments, whichever ones are pending. Give them the time, give teachers enough time to be working with them one-to-one or in smaller groups, and give kids time to be working collaboratively on their projects. As far as the second question is concerned, yes, it's been a challenge, but I feel like we all have access to a lot of transport facilities. in schools, and we need to run them in batches, of course, which is what we've planned. And thankfully for me, the geographical distance from school is not too much. So I can cope with that in terms of running them in shifts, or, running them to 30, 40 or 50% of the capacity. Besides, what we've also got to do is rely on support from other stakeholders. See if my parents can offer to drop them by themselves, walk on foot, nothing like it. Like, I'm obviously going to prefer students walking down to school as far as possible. But with buses, yes, we are going to run them at 30% capacity. Besides, if anybody else can also offer their transport facilities, maybe teachers bringing a student or two on their vehicles, nothing like it. So that's also another thing, because we live in a world where collaboration is very, very important. So those are solutions which I'm also looking at.
Thank you, Arpit. It's good to have a practical thing like in the territory. I can't dream in Bangalore and Mumbai where there would be carpool done. But yeah, very well for the territory. Mr. Dilip, a few questions on your side. Dr. Prem, just 1 second. I'll just finish with Mr. Dilip and then I'll come back to you because we have another 3 minutes and we have Dr. Sundaram who has also joined in. Last question to Mr. Dilip is, in Dune International, you are like, or various other school chains, you look at scale, you have to have standardization of your delivery. Is it this lockdown is giving birth to virtual schools? Are schools like yours thinking of a brick and mortar, which you are already existing and scaling across India? Is this lockdown giving an opportunity for a brand like yours to open virtual schools?
It's a tough question. I think, it's a mixed thing that we have to look at. There are pros as well as cons when we look at the virtual schooling. There are certain aspects which are beneficial when you do the virtual schooling. I think it was a quick transition, the use of technology, which I think every school was facing it or doing it at a very slow pace, just overnight. And, everyone got onto technology. And I think every school is now having, trained teachers who are experienced to handle technology. So that's one part. But I think on the contrary, it is also challenging. See, the virtual learning platform, I think, works better where there is a child who's self-motivated. If you have working parents at home and, if there is no monitoring happening, then I think the learning itself gets hampered over there. So that's another factor. So if someone who is, self-motivated towards their learning, I think a virtual platform would be really good for them. But otherwise, I think it's a physical schooling which is required for them. Homeschooling is something which, has been, existing for a couple of years now. And I think abroad also this happens much more as compared to India. But, this particular situation might give birth to, virtual schooling or homeschooling. And parents might also find it comfortable because I think the fee model will be completely different with that, as compared to, sending a child to a physical school. So there are pros and cons for both, but I think, it's yet to be decided which one to be preferred.
Okay, so we will still have this question. So last, very quickly, one word, starting from Mr. Rashid. People are asking, saying, would CBSE or any of the board exam would be delayed? If it is to be delayed, what would be your preferred month in 2021? One word answer. Sir, unmute.
Sir, unmute yourself, Rashid, unmute yourself.
So I think it should be May.
May, okay. Arpit?
Me as well, but I had one very short comment on the virtual schools. We must be wary of impersonating edtech platforms which are vying to be virtual schools. They're not actual school. A lot of people are just selling coaching classes. So we must be wary.
True. Board exam month, May, okay. Meeta ma'am?
I think May, somewhere mid-May to June, because if the college cycle is going to shift, I mean, this year, the colleges have begun somewhere mid-September. So if the college cycle is going to shift, we should shift. And this will align us to the international college cycle also, which begins in September. So why not have it? So maybe mid-May to June.
Mid-May to June. And Dilip, sir?
Agreed, the same May.
So unanimously May. Dr. Kashyap, we're going to come back after Dr. Sundaram's address, and we will continue with the panel that you are there. And we will take the conversation forward. Sapna ma'am, you
very fine.
you can Sapna ma'am to introduce Dr. Sundaram, and we'll take the keynote forward. Thank you everyone for being on the first panel, and the program continues.